I wanted to talk about an issue that tends to come up for persons who are transitioning to the path of bhakti from yoga, meditational backgrounds, or practices like Buddhism. Apparently, there's a lot of crossover between these paths, and of course there is. However, foundationally, there are very different approaches involved. In the Vedas, these two paths are distinguished by the terms aroha panta and avaroha panta. Aroha panta means an ascending path. Avaroha panta means the descending path. By ascending path is meant practices that are based upon one's own endeavor. And so success is determined by one's physical, mental, and intellectual capacity. Whereas in avaroha panta, in the bhakti school, the emphasis is on trying to invite divine grace, trying to become a recipient, opening one's heart to divine grace, becoming a receiver of divine grace, rather than making progress based upon one's own endeavor. Kind of like the difference between climbing a mountain with all of one's strength and capacity and surfing a wave, or becoming a lightning rod that is maximizing its chances to receive the strike of lightning. Within the yoga practices, meditational practices, there's also a lot of emphasis on renouncing this material plane. There's recognition that the enjoyment, the pleasure of this world is undesirable. One, because it's based upon illusion. It's based upon identification with this physical plane, with this physical body and senses that is not relevant to the eternal aspect within, that is not relevant to the soul. So the pleasure of this world is meaningless, one, because it's based on illusion. Number two, whatever pleasure that comes from it is very temporary. Whether it's a few moments or a few days or a few years, it all has to end eventually, right? And third, whatever enjoyment we have in this world, it creates a kind of debt in the atmosphere, and this is what creates a karmic reaction. So it's also reactionary. If we take the simple example of a bag of potato chips, why do we get pleasure out of that? One, because we're identifying with our senses, we're identifying with that taste, we're identifying with our stomach becoming happily satisfied by those potato chips. So it's an enjoyment that's based on an illusory conception. Two, the pleasure is very temporary, it only lasts a few moments. And three, if you take too much, it'll give you a stomach ache, you'll break out in pimples or whatever it may be, your liver gets clogged up. So there's that negative consequence that's there. So persons who are in this mode of self-ascension, they're seeing, any type of enjoyment I have in this world is meaningless, reactionary. Therefore, the best thing that I can do is reject it, try to get away from it. So there's a lot of emphasis on becoming free from desire, becoming free from the body, becoming free from the mind, becoming free from karma, becoming free from samsara, this whole entanglement of birth and death. The idea being that there will be this wonderful relief that is achieved once you become free from these things. The bhakti approach is very different. The bhakti approach is, actually, there's nothing wrong with this world. There's nothing wrong with the senses. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. There's nothing wrong with enjoyment, with beauty, and all of these things. The problem only arises when it's seen in connection with one's own interest, when it's perceived in a selfish way. But if the environment is perceived in its proper connection, if the environment is seen in connection with the center, with the Lord's interest, then everything's perfectly adjusted. There's no problem. There's no issue. And so in the bhakti path, the focus is not so much on rejecting anything as much as it is about readjusting and utilizing everything properly in connection with its real interest, with the central interest. And also, the focus is more rather than just becoming free from a problem, becoming free from something negative, it's about moving towards something wonderful. Rather than being about becoming free of some lower taste and some lower attraction, it's about moving towards a higher taste and a higher attraction, which, when achieved, one will automatically transcend anything lower. Once we get some higher taste, once we get some attraction within a higher sphere, then automatically anything lower will be utterly forgotten. Once you've tasted, Belgian chocolate, organic Belgian chocolate, then you won't be able to eat Twix, Kit Kat, Bounty, or any of these, supermarket imitation chocolate brands. Once you get that finer taste, then you don't need to worry about leaving the lower taste. It'll automatically leave you because you'll be so absorbed, you'll be so happily absorbed in that higher taste. So we can see by this comparison that the approach of bhakti is much more holistic, much more well-adjusted. It's not about rejecting anything. It's about connecting everything in the proper way, taking ourselves out of the center, putting the Lord, putting divinity in the center.